Good morning and welcome. My name is Helen Jennings. I'm a Stampin' Up demonstrator based here in the UK, and it's lovely to welcome you into our Monday morning live, where we are going to be playing this week with the absolutely stunning Grace's Garden bundle. So got lots going on with the Grace's Garden bundle this week. If you're interested and you're local, I have got a Stamper Stack class with this bundle on Wednesday afternoon, 1:30 till 4, which would be lovely to see you at. And obviously we'll be using it in our live today, we'll be using it in our live on Thursday, and who knows where else it's going to pop up. It is a beautiful set. And I will on Thursday find the card for you that we have already used this for. So I do a series of classes, 4 classes going around various venues in the local area. And this was one of the sets that we used last month. And it is really lovely because you can do some really fabulous sort of interactive cards with opening gates and all sorts of things. So really pretty, as you can see here. This one's got an opening gate on it. So the samples in the catalogue are really stunning. That one's using the brick folder. And there's one here. It's really pretty. That one's the little cat sitting in front of the gate. Little bird on the fence post. So you can go from the really quite simple to the really quite ornate and involved. So you can get lost and spend an hour making a card, or you can whip one up in a couple of minutes. You've got both opportunities with this beautiful stamp set, and I have got the real thing somewhere to hand. So here is the stamp set. It is a photopolymer one, which means that you are able to see through it to line things up, which can come into its own when you're building pictures like this. You know, if you want a whole little row of fence posts, you can do that because you can see through the stamp, and then you can see to line it up. And as you can see, these have all been well loved. You've got dies that cut out all your little flowers, little flourishes of flowers. You've got extra flowers in there. You've got your little bird, you've got your cat, you've got this big, you've got your gateway that will cut you a hole. So like with this card, you've got your die that will cut you a hole in the front of your card, and then you've got the die that will cut you a gate, which is obviously just slightly bigger so that it will stick over the top of your aperture. That's the posh word we're looking for, isn't it? So really stunning set, really beautiful. And I loved all of these samples, but actually the one that really caught my eye as being a little bit different is the one, apologies for wobbling you, I'm flicking back to the bundle index. And it's this one here, and I'm not going to do it identically because I'm not going to whip my sewing machine out. You can see in there, but there's been stitching all around there. Someone's had their sewing machine out. I'm not whipping my sewing machine out. And I'm also going to put in a bit more. Hi Chrissy, lovely to have you catching us live. I'm going to add in some more DSP. So this terracotta tile piece here is designer series paper. I'm going to add in a bit more, but that's the one that we're sort of aiming to loosely reproduce this morning, just because I quite liked the idea of all those different layers and slightly different colours, and something a little bit different from some of the others. So that's what we're aiming for this morning. So I'll move that out of the way, and then if we completely hit the mark, I need never show you it again. If we get somewhere near, we'll bring it back in and compare. Right, I really need to unstickify my trim. It seems to have gathered up some glue and some gunk, and we really need to sort that out. I need to sort out the entire craft room, if I'm honest, but I won't do that right now. Right now we'll just shove all the mountains of things to either side of us and concentrate on this little square in front of us, and we'll make a card, because let's face it, that's what most of us do, isn't it? Well, I don't think it's just me. Right, I've got a little basket of goodies, and I know that I got myself out a piece of pretty peacock cardstock for my card base, but as you would expect, it's right in the bottom of the pile. So let me just check that this is the right width. Yes, it is. So I'm going to score it at 10.5 centimetres. I'm just making a basic standard card base, and you can make that dependent on where you live. Can dictate what size your piece of card is going to be. I'm then going to take, and this is the first piece that I'm going to sort of veer from the original a little bit. I'm going to take this DSP from the Woven Threads pack of paper, and I'm going to cut that down so that it is just a 0.5 centimetre shorter on either side than my card front. So we're going to have that sitting on the front there. We're going to need another piece of DSP. I'm actually going to be cutting that with the stitched rectangles, but I am going to need to cut it down a bit to get it through the machine. So let's have a think about what. So rather than getting my sewing machine out and literally stitching, I'm actually going to use these stitched dies. And I think, let me decide what size I want. Hi Wendy, I think I'm going to go with that one, and I think I'll possibly make them both the same size. So I'm going to have a stitched rectangle of this paper and a stitched rectangle of some shimmery white cardstock. So let's have a rough measurement of that. So if we cut a strip that is 8.5 centimetres wide, that will be wide enough. Don't want to waste any more paper than we have to. And then we can just run that through the machine. So we have got our piece of Pretty Peacock Designer Series paper that's going to go on our card base, and we're going to run that through an embossing folder in a minute. And we have got our piece of Terracotta Tile Designer Series paper that we're going to cut with the stitched rectangle, because we're not actually stitching it. Obviously you could stitch yours. This one in the catalogue is stitched, and then we're going to have a piece of shimmery white that we are going to stitch. So let us bring our die cutting machine in. We'll take our sticky trimmer out of the way and bring in our well loved die cutting machine, as usual, moving our tea out of the way so that we don't send that flying. So let's cut our DSP first. So obviously I'm going to tuck that as near to that end as I can, because I really don't want to waste any paper. We don't want to waste anything, do we? So make sure that it doesn't wiggle off the edge. So there is our, and you always have to ease carefully out of these double stitched dies. I've actually got quite a nice stitched frame there. I don't think I can pick that up. There we go. That I could, if I trimmed that off, use for something else. I'm going to lay that carefully to one side. So there is our stitched piece of DSP. And let's grab our, I'm not going to get away with it that way, no. It's always worth a go, isn't it? Let's grab our piece of shimmery white and bring that back this way. Crunch, crunch. We are going to need our big shot again in a little while for die cutting some of the elements with our Grace's Garden dies. I'm sure that's not their official title. What are they officially called? Garden Gateway dies. We shall be using our die cutting machine again for some of our Garden Gateway dies in a little while. But for now, there's our stitched rectangle of shimmery white. So let me just pop that stitched rectangle back so it doesn't go missing amongst the debris on my desk. I'm also at the point where I just need to call time for a week, do nothing else but get myself tidied and sorted. But I don't think that's happening this week. Right. Oh, see, I put my Big Shot away and I wanted to emboss that, didn't I? Where have you gone, embossing folder? Just here. I am going to need my blue plate. Or my embossing folder. She says hopefully. When did last I have my blue plate for my embossing folder? I'd forgotten that one, sorry ladies, when I was prepping, when I was bringing everything together, I forgot my blue plate. So what I will do is, for now, we'll go with the other option, the pre-blue plate option. Actually, no, I don't need to worry. Everybody take a deep breath. If you had one of these, I'm fine, thank you, Glenda, feeling a little Monday morning-ish. If you were having one of these subtle embossing folders and it was a brand new one, you would need your blue plate. Mine I've had for a little while, so it is actually one of the old style ones. So I don't need my blue plate. I just need a brain. So I'm going to take off my thin die adapter, so I have just got my Big Shot platform. I'm going to take my Subtles embossing folder and I'm going to pop my piece of DSP in there, and I'm going to take one of the clear plates. Now obviously at this stage, if you have got a new embossing folder, or if you decide after you see this that you desperately need a Subtles embossing folder and you order one, you will need to either have one of our blue plates, or you will need to find something like the silicone mats to emboss it with, to get the right sandwich, because that's with any die cutting machine, it's all about getting your sandwich right. If you've not got enough filling, if you're not putting enough bread in, if your sandwich isn't right, it's not going to work. But so we have got, and I can feel this probably more than you can see it, but I've just run that through the Subtles embossing folder, perhaps in that little bit in the middle there, you can see it a bit more, just to give it a little bit of texture, as that's going on there. And these will come on here like that. I will also need a little piece of terracotta tile card, but we will come to that in a minute, because now we're going to do our stamping and die cutting and those sorts of things. So I'm going to these bits. I've got one, Glenda, panic not. Tea is on hand. I'll have a slurp, that will make all the difference. You are quite right, you know me so well. So let's take our piece of shimmery white card, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use this sort of little bunch of, hi Angie, little bunch of, what do you think, lupins possibly, and we're going to have a row of those stamped along the back there. So let's take that stamp. I'm not an expert gardener. I would, like with everything else, I would like to have more time to spend in my garden to sort it out. there just isn't enough hours in the day for everything I want to get done. Right, so let us take a mat, because we have photopolymer stamps, and pop that underneath our shimmery white card. And let's ink up our lupins with this stays on. And we will, I think, start in the middle. And we'll come out either side, and because we can see through that stamp, we're going to be able to see where we want to put them. I started in the middle so that I could then work out either way, so that if we ended up with a half a thing of lupins on one end, they would be hopefully fairly, although that probably wasn't very central, was it? Because this one is going to go off this edge, but that's okay. Wasn't as central as I thought. Not going to be bad actually. Going to squeeze that in there. And perhaps what I am going to do to give it a bit of symmetry is just squeeze another one in there. There, so we have our little row of lupins going across the back. And while, oh, did you, Chrissy? It's lovely, isn't it? Before we get on to colouring these in, let us bring in some Whisper White card. I'm going to just chop that in half-ish. And then we're going to need, let's see, he's going to need a gate. Two pieces of fence from Whisper White that we're going to cut out. And then we are going to need to bring in our piece of shimmery white. And on our shimmery white, we are going to stamp a couple of this other flower and an itsy bitsy bird. I think it's all right. I'm looking at my picture. I think that's all we want. So let's go with our fence panel. Actually, I'm going to lay that down. That felt as if that stamp bent a little bit as I picked it up. So we want one, and it won't matter what order these are in. Actually going to stamp that again because that was not very clear. That's much better. I was seeing a whole discussion earlier about why black ink pads sometimes don't stamp as well, and there was talk about how they dip in the middle, how as they get a little bit used with time, because they're sort of felt pads, they dip a bit in the middle, and it is useful, morning Sarah, to use the whole of the pad and round the outside to ink up, not just your centre bit. So you can almost see there that where I've used that centre bit, there's not a lot of ink, but where you use the edge, that's where the ink sits. So that's one of the benefits of tapping onto your stamp rather than taking your stamp to your ink pad, because if there is any variations in the level of the pad on the top, you're going to sort of overcome them, and you can give it a bit of a twist as well, as you like. But there we are, that looks as if it's well inked. So the good thing about photopolymer stamps is that you can normally see where the ink is. Beautiful. So there is our gate and our two pieces of fence that we are going to cut out of that piece in a moment. And then onto the shimmery white, because we're going to be watercolouring these. We need two of these flowers. Well, they're not just flowers, they're sort of a little arrangement of flowers. This set is perfect if you're doing Mother's Day cards. But you could also be doing mail cards for a gardener with this one. That's where it's versatile, because it is sort of flowers in its garden setting rather than flowers in a vase. That does make them a bit more sort of open to any of the guys that like a bit of gardening. And let's also pick up our little bird and stamp him. So we have, I think, got our stamping done. Stays On is definitely a blacker black, Glenda. Glenda's asking, is Memento supposed to be black? Memento is tuxedo black, whereas Stays On is jet black. So you definitely get a blacker black with Stays On. But of course, Stays On isn't always the easiest ink to stamp with, and some people don't like to use it on their photopolymer stamps and things because it does stain them. I don't get particularly worried about staining. You wouldn't want to use Stays On cleaner to get your Stays On off your photopolymer stamps. You've almost just got to accept that they're going to stain, but at the end of the day they are tools, not jewels. So yeah, so I personally don't worry about things like them getting a little bit of staining on, but for some people, you know, that is an issue. But so yeah, you don't quite get the same black with Memento ink as you do with Stays On. So I'm just looking at my water brushes. I want one of the slightly thinner ones rather than one of the slightly fatter ones. That one doesn't seem to be wanting to come through. I find every now and then I need to soak my water brushes in some white vinegar just to get them running again, and it's looking like we might nearly be at that stage with some of my water brushes. That one looks as if it's coming. Yeah, excellent. Right, so let's bring in our colours and let's do some painting of some of our flowers. So those ones we're just going to cut out. We're leaving those. You can get Stays On ink pads in all sorts of colours, Angie. I know that Stampin' Up now are stocking the saddle brown, and we obviously have stocked black for a long time. But yes, you can get Stays On ink in all sorts of colours. Obviously not from Stampin' Up, but from other craft outlets. And you know, because you can use Stays On because it stays on. That's what it does, isn't it? So it is that permanent ink. So if you were doing a big project that you wanted different coloured permanent inks, then, you know, that's an option. You can get Memento in all sorts of different colours as well. But for us, we don't need those colours necessarily because we've got our own beautiful colours. We just use those blacks. Right, let me just open up these. So I've got Pretty Peacock, Mango Melody, Mint Macaron, Sahara Sand, and Terracotta Tile. That's not ever so. Let's see if we can squeezy that one a little bit more. Oh, well, we'll see how we go. If not, we'll have to tap it onto a block. That's a bit better. Oh, that one's already got some in. This is an old style block. I will gradually replace them all, but while they're all functioning, I don't think I'm going to want a lot of that one anyway. I'm not going to, just for the sake of it, replace them. Right, so let's go in on our flowers. On here, I'm thinking, where's that gone? Oh, I managed to get some blue ink on there. Never mind. We'll So we're not worrying too much about being too particular. We're just adding some colour in to our flowers. Let's have some little blobs where those buds are. Obviously you could colour these with your StazOn, with watercolour pencils. Let's go big flowers first and then we'll come in with blobs. You could have had multicoloured, we could have had lots of different coloured lupins here. If that's what we're deciding they are, they may not be lupins, they may be something else. Could be sort of Canterbury bells, in which case they're blue, aren't they? But you are the artist, you make them whatever it is you want to make them. I don't know how many terracotta tile flowers there are out there, but the terracotta tile and pretty peacock colour combination is such a pretty one. I'm going to just try and bring that brush to a bit more of a point for these blobby bits. As I say, we're not worrying too much about being ultra precise. We're just adding in a bit of colour. There we go. Let's give that brush a bit of a clean. Then I think on really going to see these leaves back here, I don't think necessarily. I'm just going to add a bit of mint macaron in there just in case they're peeping through the gate and the fence. They're quite pretty. Let's add in a bit of grass down the bottom here. Again, this probably won't be seen, but just in case it sneaks through somewhere, we'll make sure there's a bit of colour. And then let's just put in a bit of Sahara sand on the bottom here to give us a bit of mud. So there's that set of flowers. It's going to be our in the background. And now we've got our fences. We're going for these flowers that are going to be in the foreground. And for these, I'm going to get some Mango Melody for the actual flowers down here. These sort of star-shaped flowers just here. Is all of those flowers done? Have we missed any? No, I think that's okay. And I think the leaves for those flowers will go again in with mint macaron. And then we'll go back in with our terracotta tile for these ones. So this really isn't very precise, it is just laying down some colour where the blobs are. Let's put a bit darker colour on that one because that one didn't stamp quite as strongly as the others. There we go. And then with the leaves, excuse me, I'm clearing my throat, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. Leaves for this one, we're going to go in with some pretty peacock. Add a sense of that as well on the stem. And clean our brush, we'll come in again with the mint macaron for these grasses on the bottom. And again with our Sahara sand just here to fill in any gaps when they're cut out with the dies. Okay, so then we've just got our little bird, and we'll give him, go in with a bit of mango melody. Let's try and make him quite a nice strongish colour. And perhaps we'll just add in a little bit of Sahara sand as well. There he is. So let me just close up these pads for now because, hi Doreen, it's a beautiful set, isn't it? It's absolutely stunning, and is one really that you can just get so lost in painting pictures. You feel a bit like an artist, even if you are far from. I'm not suggesting that you're far from an artist. That was a personal reflection, no reflection on anybody else. Right, so we're going to bring in our die cutting machine again because we're now going to die cut some of these flowers. I think we need a cup of tea, slurp of tea before we do that. And I also think I'm going to grab my magnetic base plate, particularly as we've got that little bird to cut. So let's unwind this. Let's bring in our magnetic base plate. You may or may not have one of these with your machine. It's not the end of the world if you haven't. You could always use some no-tap tape or some washi tape to hold your dies in place if you feel you need to. So let's come on in to our set of dies. Now we are going to need, so this is that little flower, one of our flowers. This is the other. Oh no, we don't need to cut that one. We just need the flowers, and we need, if we were going to cut the other flowers, we'd have used that one. We need a little bird, and we are going to need some of this sort of foliage, and we're going to bring in some, do you know, my brain is just going, you know, if ever you thought that age wasn't going to come to you, it's come to me. We're also going to need this gateway and the fence, and we're going to need some of that foliage. We're going to use some vellum. Thank you, brain, for finally kicking in. That's the word we're looking for. We're going to use some vellum, and we're going to cut some vellum out with this. But let's start off with these stumps that we've just coloured in. So, got nice inky fingers now. That's good. That is just jumping a little bit just there, so I'm going to just move it slightly. That happens with the magnetic base plate sometimes, that the dies will just jump around a little bit. Little bird, are you going to jump around? You're going to jump around, so we'll have to find another space for you in a minute. Actually, if I was to cut that down, I would get some of my gates on there as well, wouldn't I? Which would make far more sense because I could run them through a few at a time. So Birdie, are you going to jump just there, or is that a better position for you? Come here. Such a tiny little die. Oh no, you're going to sit there. That's good. Bring you down just a smidge. Make sure those are not overlapping because we don't want one die cutting out the other. And then let's bring in our gate and fence posts, and hopefully we'll be able to run some of these through at the same time as well. So there's our gate, and there's one of our fence posts. There's a bit of the dog, does like to join in. Don't know how he manages to spread himself quite so far, really. Right, so that's the first run through, and we've managed to do, sorry, wobble you all about, we've managed to do our bird. Let me pop that back on the magnetic sheet so I don't lose it. And hopefully we won't lose him for when it comes to putting it all together. So that's one of our set of flowers. We're going to need another. And there's our gate. And one of our fence panels. So let's do the other fence panel. Sorry, not exactly the most exciting viewing, watching me die cut all these things. It has to be done. I had to stamp them and colour them before I could cut them out. So I hope everybody's got an exciting week planned ahead. I know for some of you elsewhere, you're already on Monday evening. We're here Monday morning, nice and bright Monday morning here. Let's just grab a little piece of vellum. Oh, as I say, we're going to do some of these foliage pieces. Let's see how many we need. I'm not going to run that all the way through, hopefully. Oh no, it didn't quite go. I was a little too enthusiastic. So I'm not even going to try and line that up again. There's one. It's a good workout on a Monday morning. Now I'm not getting the same pressure. I never get the same pressure with my magnetic base plate as I do with my normal plate. That's actually ripped off a little bit. I'm not going to worry about that, but I am going to swap the plates back over. You do get to know your own machine. You know, your machines are probably going to be different. But I know with that one, that vellum's cut straight out. I know with my machine I do not get the same pressure with my magnetic base plate as I do with my normal plate, which if you're just cutting out sort of outlines isn't a problem, but with this trying to cut through the vellum was proving to be a little bit more tricky. Wasn't quite giving it the pressure. So we were talking earlier about the sandwich. There wasn't quite enough meat in that sandwich. Just needed another slice of ham just to make that work. That's gone off the side slightly, but that's okay because these are going in the background. Yeah, it's nice having a bit of vellum, isn't it? It just adds a bit more of something. Let's do one more for good measure. I'm not sure how many of these we're going to need, but if we've got them another one cut, then we're good to go. As I say, this sandwich is much better. It's just slicing through that vellum. And your machine is going to be different from somebody else's, so you know, just because somebody else says this works for them won't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. We have to get to know our die cutting machine are like our children. They're all different. You have to get to know their little quirks and their little foibles and likes and dislikes. Right, hopefully now we have all of our ingredients to create our card. Let me bring in my snail. So let's start off. We've got our piece of Pretty Peacock DSP that we ran through with that Subtles embossing folder, just because it gives it a little bit touch of texture, particularly in this sort of style of card where we, although we're not getting a sewing machine out and stitching, we are sort of using the idea of stitching. I'm going to turn that over because I didn't quite fold that completely straight, so we'll have the excuse me, slightly longer end on the front. So there we are. There's our piece of DSP that has been embossed, and then we have a little piece of from the same pack, from that woven threads, we've got a piece of DSP that is terracotta tile. So we're going to put that on a bit of an angle. We're actually going to rough the edge up of this piece of card a little bit because we want it to look a little bit like a piece of, because it's stitched, you want the idea of it being sort of a little bit of a bit of material stitched on the top. Let's come in on this bottom and give that a bit of a curl. So I'm just using my bone folder to curl that up a little bit. Just like that. And we're going to have that coming on at a bit of an angle that way. So I say, although we're not getting the sewing machine out, we have used the stitch rectangles. So that is sort of giving it that sense that we've sewn it all together, which of course we haven't. And then we're going to build up with our fences and things coming in front of our flowers just here. Actually, I'm just going to lay that. I'm not pressing it down because I'm going to put some of that vellum behind it. So I'm just going to lightly lay that down so that I can pick that up a little bit to pop some vellum behind it. Oh, see, you can see how lightly I laid that down because it's moved. So we'll have another fence piece here, and then have our other fence piece coming in here, Let's have a look now at our vellum. So we're just going to, I'm going to put some snail in the bottom of it. Just have it coming up here. I can stick that one down now. And a bit more snail on this one. It's okay, that bit's not going to show, so it doesn't matter that it's just torn off. Let's have that coming up here. And this little bit of one can come up here. Got 2 more bits of vellum, haven't I? Let's have this one in here, and we'll have one more on the end. So I'm just trying to get that little landlocked bit out of the middle. Is it going to come? This one coming down on the end here. So let's give these fence panels and gate posts and things a really good press down into place now. Ooh, where have you come from? Okay, then we're going to come in with these flowers that are going to sit on the front here. I think we'll put a couple of mini dimensionals on those. Move that over just slightly so that flower sits in that gap. And then we'll do the same on this other end. Keeping an eye on my bird so that that doesn't get lost in the excitement. And this flower again, we want that to be sitting so that it fills the gap in that fence. So there we have our flowers in the background, our vellum, our flowers in the foreground. So now we just need to do our sentiment and a bit of ribbon on there as well. So just see if I've got a little piece of terracotta tile. Just rummaging around in my scrap bag. And we're going to take from the here this little stamp set, this little stamp that says, "I thank you for all the kindness in yours." So we presumably could have "with all my heart, I thank you for all the kindness in yours." But we're actually going to not stamp it all. We're going to try and be clever. So drum roll, hold your breath. We're going in. Let me get a block. And what we want is we want to lose the, so we're going to start with, we're going to lose the entire bottom row of that stamp. So I've just got some no tack tape here and I'm literally covering up that whole bottom row, and I'm going to cover up the eye. So hopefully what we're going to be left with is thank you for all. And we're going to take Versamark. It's nothing like making things awkward for yourself, but we are attempting to case the catalogue. So with some tweaks. So let's see if we can also manage to get this greeting. So I'm going to ink up with my Versamark the thank you for all. And then, and this is the important bit when you're doing this, take the tape off before you stamp it. Right, I'm going to come right down the bottom here, because hopefully that will help me line it up a bit. So hopefully we've got thank you for all. And now we want the kindness. So we need to ink to cover up that bit and that top row and that little, oh, actually, nearly what we must make sure we do is give that stamp a good clean first, because that's already going to have Versamark on it. So let's get rid of that ink on there, and then let's try again to cover up that top row. That bit and that bottom, tiny bottom bit of that Y just there. Need to cover up. Okay, and then let's just try and ink up that, and let's see what happens. So we'll line that up on there. Right, let's see when we bring in our white embossing powder how we've done, and hopefully we haven't left it too late for that first bit of Versamark to dry it out. Oh, it is a little bit dry. Now I am going to come in with my paintbrush, because I don't want to flick this off too much, because brush away. That doesn't look too bad, does it? That's not too shabby. I have managed to get embossing powder everywhere. Let's get that heated before we lean on it or do something dreadful that means we've got to start again. So let's just get our heat gun. And it nice and hot. And let's thank you for all the kindness. And obviously you don't have to go to all that faff. You could just find yourself a happy birthday, a happy Mother's Day, or some such. But we did it. And let's bring in my mini trimmer and let us just trim that off. And then we'll snip and snip. Is our little bird still there? Yes, he is. Now, I'm not sure. He is quite a tiny little bird. I'm going to come in with one of my things of dimensionals that I've got to the point where I'm using the edge, and I'm just going to cut a little strip I have been in classes where I've had to dig those edge pieces out of the bin because people have just got to the thought that because the bits in the middle had all gone, that was the end of the usefulness of that particular piece of set of dimensionals. But oh my goodness me, no, we absolutely need to use up every last scrap, and those edge pieces come into their own. So the last thing we need is some of this sheer linen ribbon, the mint macaron sheer linen ribbon, which is really lovely, and a piece of good old linen thread. So let us see if we can be clever and take those side by side. What I'm going to do is hopefully grab a piece of tear and tape, and I'm going to turn that over. So we've got a little bird stuck on there. I'm going to turn that over and run a piece of tear and tape down the back of there. That's it, nearly there. So we've just got a piece of tear and tape down the back of there, and then we've got our piece of linen thread and our piece of ribbon side by side, and we'll start off down here. We'll go up this way, we'll curl it round and bring it back, and then we'll curl it round and bring it back. What we might need to do is just get another piece of tear and tape to hold that down. Stay. What happens on the back of these things stays on the back. Let's just have another piece of tear and tape on the back there just to anchor that down, and then we'll snip this off this end, and we'll turn that over, and we're going to stick that on the front here. That just needs anchoring down a bit more, doesn't it? It's being a little bit fiddly. Apologies for wobbling you again. Let's stay. Perfect. Out like that, I think. So I think we'll come in and we'll do a little run of dots of mini adhesives, mini dimensionals on the back of there. Take those off. 1, 2, and 3. Not so worried about my linen thread escaping slightly from the bottom and the top. We'll have that coming along there somewhere. And then last but not least, somewhere we've got our little woven threads sequins. So these ones are going to coordinate with those terracotta tiles and pretty peacocks. Now let's just find a little, didn't want quite that much. Let's just put in a few of these little sequins. Let's have So a pretty peacock one in there, because that's where we have that little bit of pretty peacock ink. So hopefully that will all blend in together. In fact, what I might do is just have another one just there, like that. And oh, they're all popping out. Another terracotta one up there. We'll have a large blue one just there, and we will need to put one more small one on, because at the moment we've got an even number and that will never do. So let's just put a little spot in there and see if we can find a little terracotta one just there. Oh, come back wherever you are. There. Oh, wrong lid for wrong thing. Right, there we are, our Grace's garden, and we've used quite a few things in there. So we've used some of the woven threads papers, we've scrunched up our shimmery white a little bit, we've got flowers in the background there, watercoloured with terracotta tile. We've got these flowers in the foreground, watercoloured terracotta tile, mango melody. We've got some pretty peacocks, some mint macaron. We've used a little bit of Sahara sand on the bottom here. We could go in with Sahara sand on the fence and just tone that down a little bit if we wanted to. We've added in some pretty sequins. We've got our ribbon and our linen thread and our little bird, and we managed to adapt that stamp to make it say thank you for all the kindness. So a really pretty little card using Grace's garden and the garden dies. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I will be back on Thursday and we'll create something different. And as I say, look out in the meantime for anything else that might pop up using this suite. And certainly I've got the stamper stack on Wednesday afternoon when we'll be doing 3 different cards, 3 different designs. We make 2 of each. So we'll create 6 cards using this particular bundle, so that's something to look forward to. And there is still space at the table if you're local and would like to join us. So until then, have a really good week. I think I need some breakfast and perhaps a hot cup of tea to get me geared up for the rest of the day. So have a good one, everybody. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you all soon.